It is my privilege today to interview Olatunde and Lorna Ashusomi. They responded to my series of questionnaires on Authority Magazine titled Lessons from Power Couples, couples who are married and work together. And I was so impressed with their answers. I wanted to hear a little bit more from them. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Shatunde, or may I call you Tunde?
Tunde is perfectly fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Is a first generation of Nigerian descent. He and his wife Lorna both have a list of impressive credits as movie and TV directors, writers, and producers. You would recognize the shows if I listed all of them. Lorna is also the author of an inspirational book called Becoming Bold, which I think is a wonderful title. It makes me curious to read it. They live in Los Angeles with their 2 children. So congratulations for having your interview published on Authority Magazine. In this interview, I'll try to expand a bit on what you shared in that article. So to begin with, how did you, Tunde, happen to come to the US, and how did you get involved in the movie business?
Oh, well, I was actually born in the U.S. Yeah, I was born
Oh,
in
is
San
that
Bernardino.
right? First
Yeah,
generation means you're the first generation born here.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, my parents came over about 30 years before I was born. They met each other in California, actually,
I see.
um, and and yeah, I just uh, have been living what they've called the American dream. And it's been it's been quite a ride seeing where we started out as a family, and seeing where they are now, my parents, what they've been able to accomplish, and it's been unbelievably inspiring.
Can you give us like a Cliff Notes version of their story and yours?
Oh, yeah, they so after they met, they had my sister and I, and they my dad was an international salesman and was doing a lot of business with Nigeria at the time. My mom was working at Disneyland,
Okay.
and they both were unbelievably educated. My mom had a master's degree, my dad a degree, but they were just doing their putting in the work while they were raising us as kids. And eventually, my mom became she worked she got a job at the FDA. Inspecting medical devices and medical and medicine before it was imported into the United States.
I see.
Yeah, and then my dad took a number of different sales jobs and ended up working at AT&T, doing corporate accounts. And they're both now retired in Yorba Linda, California.
Gosh, it's a wonderful success story. I'm sure you're very proud of them, as I'm very happy for them. How did you get interested in the movie business?
So when I was about 7 years old, my parents took me back to Nigeria with my sister, and I met my grandfather on my dad's side, and he was a stills photographer, a state photographer for the Nigerian dictators at that time. So
Oh,
whenever there was a coup, they would still keep him on as the state photographer. And he took me to his development room, and he would put the picture in the chemicals, and you'd see it. You see the picture materialize like magic. And he
magic.
told me at the time, he said, you know, taking pictures is about capturing emotion. You want to capture the emotion with,
Oh,
and that has stayed with me over the years. And originally, I wanted to be a novelist when I got into college, and then I saw a movie called Crimson Tide, directed by Tony
I've
Scott,
seen it.
and I sort of realized, oh, I could actually show people what I'm thinking instead of having them read and try to imagine what I'm thinking. Uh,
Yes.
and that hit me like a lightning bolt. and I transferred from Cal Lutheran University to Chapman University to study film, and graduated from film and wrote a ton, and was fortunate enough to be a PA on a dog show called 100 Deeds of Eddie McDowd, an office PA. And I just kept meeting people, and I just kept writing. And eventually I met a guy by the name of Joe Carnahan, who believed in me, saw me as a PA, saw a bit of my previous work, sort of skipped over that part of the story. Yeah, I was a PA in a kitchen, and he hired me as an assistant, and he read some of the feature scripts that I wrote, and he said, "You know what? I'm gonna get one of your scripts made for you." And I laughed because it's difficult, almost impossible for that to occur. But sure enough, yeah, I wrote it. I gave it to him. He really backed me up, and the next thing I knew, Milla Jovovich was starring in The Fourth Kind. Paul Brooks of Gold Circle Films bought it. Universal released it, and it was on thousands of screens around the world. And then it was such a fortunate series of events, and I've never looked back since.
So the magic doesn't just happen in creating the film. The magic happens when you see your film on the screen. Gosh,
Yeah,
I can only imagine what that must be like. When I saw my first book, a physical book that I had written, it was that kind of, wow, what a moment.
Yeah.
And Lorna, how did you get involved in this field as well?
It's funny because I'm a first generation American as well, because my parents immigrated from the islands, and my mother's from Dominica and my father's from St. Lucia, and we ended up in an American or US territory, St. Croix Virgin Islands, and I have 4 other sisters. So there's 5 girls in the family, or 5 women in the family. And my parents worked incredibly hard, much like Tunde's parents. So we both share that sort of immigrant story of having to work really hard, work your way up. And I always wanted to be a writer. Since I was like 9 years old, I was writing stories and poems, and I had like reams of books and all the things. And my mom was like, "Oh, that's a hobby. That's something you do on the side. Like what you're doing right now, that's not a real career path."
No way you could make money doing that.
Yeah, no way. And she was always like, "My daughters can't be poor." Like you have to be able to provide for yourself without a spouse. Like that's the goal.
Yes.
And so she was
Smart woman she was.
Yes. And so I believed her. And so it took me quite a while to realize that, oh, I might have to not have money, but I must be a writer. And in college, I shifted from, I already had a minor in pre-law, so I finished my degree. Then I had like minors, and I majored in English. And by the time I was a junior, it was like, oh, I'm definitely going to be a writer. And I started, much like Tunde, I don't think it was like a ton of bricks. Like I was like researching all like, am I going to be a poet? I'm like, no, that's not as satisfying as I wanted to be. A novelist. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know. I didn't land on novel writing very long, because I've always been attracted to TV and movies, and I think it was because I was not allowed to watch them growing up as much.
Some mystery there.
Yeah, there was a mystery there, and there were some shows that I just like, oh, I really love that show. I want to make a show like that. And I think it was like Different World, Cosby Show, Living Single, and I was like, I want to do a show like that. And so it was like, I'm gonna do movies and TV shows. So I started writing when I was in college. I wrote like my first like screenplay that was terrible, but it was such a great start. And then I kept writing from there, and everything, as you can imagine, got better. But then I stayed and I was in school in Texas, and I stayed in Dallas, and worked in independent film, and helped to produce a couple shorts. And then I was like, oh, it's time for me to go to LA and like really cut my teeth. And I ended up getting my first PA job on the Bernie Mac show, which was really amazing. I met some wonderful people, and I just thought, oh, I don't really know enough people to like make this work. So it was like, okay, I'm going to eventually work for a showrunner. and they're going to give me a job as a writer. And that's what happened. I ultimately ended up the showrunner I worked for years on Dexter, first on The Shield, then Dexter, and then multiple pilots that
Mhm.
Robert Kirkman, and he's the creator of The Walking Dead, comic book and franchise, and who's a lovely gentleman and super brilliant. And so I worked with him. I worked with some other writers, like Gary Lennon, who's incredibly brilliant, and a wonderful mentor as well. And yeah, my first showrunner gave me from The Shield, gave me my first writing job on Hemlock Grove, and then I went on to do other series. So
I
yeah.
really believe that our souls pull us toward our destiny.
Yes, ooh, beautifully said. Yes, I totally agree with that.
And
Yes.
and my son is trying so hard to teach his children that relationships are everything. You know, creating and maintaining relationships give you the connections you need often to move forward. So I hear that in both of your stories.
So true.
So true, so true. And I know how hard it is. I think networking was really hard for me to wrap my brain around, because I don't ever want to come across as if I'm only befriending somebody to take what they have.
Yeah,
And I've heard people say that, oh, but it is a relationship. It's a give, and it's a give and take, and it's not just about taking. Like, there is something pulling you to that person that is legitimately genuine.
yeah,
And and the thing is, when you feel the connection, you have to disengage from this idea that, oh, I'm networking. No, you're building a relationship with
right.
somebody you feel this pull toward, like you were saying about the soul pulling. Like, we're pulled to different people for a reason, and you just kind of have to go with it and sort of abandon this notion of, oh, I'm trying to take. No, you're both going to share. It's a sharing that's going to happen between the relationship, and as much as they will give to you, surprisingly, you have something to give in return.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you so much for expounding on that, because you have to let go of the, the negative voice that's judging you
Yes.
or trying to question your motives, and just go with the connection that you're feeling.
Absolutely.
You both said in the article that you are each other's best friends, and I sort of was reading between the lines. I'm not sure that I'm reading this accurately, but in the beginning of your relationship, it sounded like you were separated for periods of time when one or the other of you was on a long job. And
Yeah.
then you decided to work together, and was part of that reason to work together so that you could spend more time consistently with your marriage?
Yeah.
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 Well, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so when we first started out, we were both usually working in LA.
Yeah.
When we first got, we
Yeah.
actually met on the job. We were at Technicolor. We met at Technicolor Complete Post off of Gower.
It's a Hollywood story.
Yeah,
for sure.
and I saw her walk in, and I thought, okay, that's my wife, and then what usually doesn't happen is she came and started talking to me, and
Uh-huh.
we had a wonderful conversation right in front of the vault table. That it used to be you take your film as a PA and drop it off to the vault where so we were both PAs dropping off.
Yes.
And it was really funny, but looking back at those guys that were there, watching us connect for like 20 minutes in a business place, and people were
Yes.
having to go around us to conduct the rest of their business. But yeah, it was that there was a connection there, and then we started dating. Then we can get into the details of that later. But back to your original question, which was that as PAs, we were always in the same town. But then as our careers started expanding, and she started writing, and I started writing and directing. Suddenly, I'm off to Bulgaria for extended periods of time. Suddenly, I'm off to Vancouver, Atlanta, New York, you name it. And we spent Australia. And there began this adventure where I would go and come back, and I didn't get the time to spend with my best friend. And still, we're in Toronto now, but now what we've sort of trying to develop is a way to stay connected, even though one of us is gone. You know, and I wasn't only the one to leave. Shortly after Naya was born, our daughter, Lorna was going off and working in Texas and working in Chicago. And so we've learned to try and find those times to connect, whether that's traveling with, or just leaving the job after a certain period of time and going home.
Mhm.
And you know, because really, as much as I love my work, what I really love is her, and I really love the kids. And I really love spending my time with her. You know, the whole point is to spend time
Well,
with
how
her.
we spend our time.
Thank you.
How we spend our time is a demonstration of our priorities, isn't it?
Mm,
Yeah, it
mm.
is.
And if you want your marriage to last, it needs nurturing. You can't
Yeah.
ignore it, or these
Mhm.
long distance relationships don't work forever.
It's true.
No, they don't. They eventually disintegrate. But thankfully, with the advent of all the technology, we've been able to stay connected in what it feels sort of real, you know, in a way, because we can talk to each other every day, see each other every day, like walk around in the space, sort of. And I don't know, it's just this faux thing that sort of ties you to the next time we're together. And before kids, I was able to just go, and I'm like, oh, I'm not in a room, I'm coming to meet you. And with that we have two, it's just gotten to be so difficult because we don't want to upset their balance. So
Right.
we've just been trying, and we decided, yeah, that we were like, let's just work together.
Yeah. Yeah.
That seems easier.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there's a balance when you're away, understanding what your loved one is going through when you're not
Yes.
there. And that was a process for me, understanding what happened when I was gone, particularly once we had kids.
Oh yeah.
You know, what is Lorna going through essentially as a single mother while I'm not there? You know, and
I
it took
read
time.
how you got really connected with your first baby.
Yeah, well, that was extremely helpful. That was extremely helpful.
Oh, gosh. Obviously, you're both very talented, and working together, I'm wondering how you handle disagreements as far as the project is concerned.
Oh, as far as work.
Yeah. I feel like we've gotten a lot better from the very first time we attempted to work together.
Mhm.
Because you know, he's a director, he's sort of A-type. I'm a writer too, so I can be, you know, A-type as a executive thinker. Um, but at some point I sort of deferred to I think I know I've at some point deferred to like, okay, well, you should take the lead on this project. So whatever it is that you feel strongly about, it should be the prevailing idea. So
Mhm,
at some point there has to be somebody who's going to take the lead on things.
mhm.
And because it was some of the things we've done are more horror or more sci-fi driven, I'm like, okay, I defer to you in this particular area because I don't know. And then if I feel like my idea is stronger, it's still a sense of what is servicing the story. So even if he does, you know, there's times when he's like, oh, I love this idea that you've come up with, and it's like, well, that does serve the story, or you know, it's just whatever services the story sometimes is the biggest tiebreaker, and sort of emotionally detaching from some of like, oh, this is my idea, or this is your idea. It's what services the story.
Yeah, and I think you know, so I started out in features. Now I kind of straddle both worlds. I do television now. And features, you know, as a writer director, it's my way or the highway a lot of the time. That was sort of how I was trained
Yeah.
from film school, and you know what all the great directors sort of talk about, you know. But then what you sort of learn, even in features, is really it's a collaboration. Sure, the director has the vision, but it's a collaboration. And then she convinced me to look into television and look into streaming, and was sort of explaining television isn't what it was when we first started out in this industry. This is really something special that you really need to be involved in. And what that taught me was collaboration, something she already knew. because you're moving at such a speed, and yet it needs to be at such quality that you need to have the collaboration of unbelievably talented individuals around you in order to sustain the consistency of a season, or sustain the consistency of 5 seasons.
Mhm.
Yes.
And that collaboration was great because I could take that and learn all these tools. I learned to collaborate now and use them in my collaboration with her. These are tools she already had, but that I had to learn and evolve into. And that has made it great too. So it's less about, okay, this was the vision I started out with, or this was the vision she started out with. It's more about, okay, now we have this shared vision. How do we make it the best it can be? We really have to exchange ideas and land on what's the best idea and what's best for the project, as
So
Lynn said.
you're making the priority, the quality of the project,
Yeah.
kind
Absolutely.
of losing your individual egos as far as the project is concerned. Am I
Absolutely.
reading that correctly?
That's exactly
Yes,
right. Yeah.
Yes, that was way more succinct than
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's basically what I mean.
You're talking about summing it up. Yeah. That's clear.
Well, for many years, I've been the sole proprietor of my little coaching business, but the last few years, I have attracted and so appreciate a team of women that work for me that do stuff that I don't want to do and I'm not good at,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody complements the strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
of each other. Yeah, for sure.
Oh gosh, it's awesome. I much prefer my team approach now rather than being on my own.
Yeah.
Every couple that I've interviewed makes spending quality time together a high priority, and also separating business time from personal time. But what struck me that you said, and I think it was you, Lorna, that said this, the priority of being vulnerable with each other and sharing I assume that means sharing your feelings. I'm
Mhm.
wondering what that looks like, or if you have any particular format for being times when you need to be more vulnerable with each other.
Yeah, we have our date nights, and I sort of have, because we don't, he's out of town a lot. I always have a list of things in my head that I want to unpack. I don't know if he's
Uh-huh.
as full of it. I mean, he talks about things all the time, but I'm like, oh, these are the things I need to share. Like, I must share in my mind. I feel like I must share these things. I must, let him know where I am emotionally.
Mhm.
And so I just think it's a part of connecting. Like, I feel like we are drifting constantly, and depending on where we are, if we're not in the same place, or even if you are in the same place, it's like you're on these glacial pallets, and you have the potential of just drifting so far and wide apart. And
Right.
the only thing that will bring you back together is sharing and being painfully honest about whatever is happening emotionally, like whatever those fears are. I am afraid that maybe I handled this situation with my daughter incorrectly. I am afraid that, where is the next thing with the strike, and it's just all the little things that if you don't talk about, it's just getting wider, and the gap just gets wider and wider until you don't have it. You're not talking about anything.
Right.
You're not saying anything. And, it's so important to always just keep communicating about where you are emotionally.
Yeah, I'm much less structured. It just comes out, and it may come out, 5 months later or something, but yeah, I tend to go to work, and then I come home and I forget everything that happened at work, just on maybe the drive home, or maybe just walking in the door and smelling, my son's head or something, I don't know, but it just goes. And it's all about trying to just connect, and it's not a conscious thing for me, but it's something I really treasure,
Yeah.
coming home today and seeing everybody, because yeah, I do travel a lot. So it's a really special thing. It's like, it's like it's like your favorite food you smell when you come in, when you come
Yeah.
home, or if you're out and about and you smell that food and it reminds you of home, and it's a thing you just gotta have, and it just knocks everything out of what's going on in my mind at that time.
You walk in the door and all of a sudden, oh, I'm in my safe place.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And so she's my safe place, you know, and
Yes.
I feel like I can tell her anything
Yeah.
at any time, you know, and she can help me figure out problems. She can help me figure out all sorts of things.
I'm a
Or-
problem solver.
Yeah, or you know, and it's not about work. It's about, you know, what's going on in our lives, you know.
Right.
You know, how do we solve these things, you know? And she'll have a million ideas, and they're all great. And that was that's been the really incredible thing for me for being married, about being married, is
Mhm.
that there is this Goliath over here that is just has this mind that is just
I didn't know I was a Goliath.
you are, yeah,
Bad.
you are a Goliath of a thinker. You are.
You
And
better write that
it
down and
moves at
frame
this-
it, Lorna.
yeah, it moves at this speed. And it's what drew me to her initially, right? Like it's just this thing that is just so fascinating to listen to. Anyway, so that's where I come from.
He's the
I-
best.
Wait,
yes,
this is being recorded too. you know?
I know.
sounds like he's a keeper.
He's definitely a keeper. I always say I just keep him in my back pocket. I tuck him really tightly in my back pocket.
I've been coaching couples for almost 30 years.
Wow.
Let me tell you, one of the laws of relationship is that it's sharing on the feeling level that creates connection. When
Mm.
we're just sharing opinions or thoughts or ideas or beliefs, it stays kind of up on the surface, a business level, but it's the sharing of our emotions that creates emotional connection. So
Mm.
that's what you're describing to me,
Mm.
that
We're
Lauren,
getting it right.
what's that?
I said, I think we're getting it right.
You're getting it right. There's no doubt that you're getting it right. I also really love that when you got engaged, you took divorce off the table.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's a non-negotiable.
Yeah, I think the idea was we made very definitive choices. Like we asked each other the hard questions before we got married. We decided. I knew that he was a great person for me, and I knew he felt the same. And so at some point, you have to say, I made a great decision marrying this person. And whatever we go through has nothing to do with us being incompatible,
Yes.
you know, at least for us,
Yes.
you know,
Mm.
for us. And we just had to take the divorce off the table. As like for us, it would have been like the way out, because I'm tired, because this is frustrating, marriage is hard.
Mm.
And you just kind of have to take it off the table at the start. But I think we did understand that we were engaged for almost, or together for about 4 years before we got married.
Mhm.
And I think it's not just about being together, it's about really analyzing and looking at the person of how they will be as a spouse, as for me as a father, how he'll be as a partner. And I was like, oh, he's fantastic. So I knew that divorce could never be an option for us. So yeah.
Well said.
When you make a choice like that and it's written in concrete,
Yes.
you know, then it motivates you to work through the tough times because
Yes.
there is no other option. My
That's right. That's
my
right. Yeah.
son and his wife have been married for about 30 years, and a young man asked my son recently, how did you and Shelley stay married for 30 years? I don't know anyone who's been married for 30 years. And Peter kind of laughed and said, well, we're stubborn. But then he got serious and said, you make a good choice and then you stick with your choice.
There
Yeah,
you go.
there it is.
Yeah.
You summarize really well.
Yes.
Well, I love all the embellishments that you're adding to this dialogue here. This is great. Lorna, you also mentioned how important it is to think positive thoughts about your partner, to, you know,
Yes.
to see him, to think the best of him.
Yes. I have a friend recently who said, fill the gaps with trust and love. And I was like, oh, that's what I do. But I read this thing about thinking positively about your spouse in a book I read, I think. Um, and, and I was so struck by it. I was like, because there's so many negative thoughts that barrage our mind, generally
Yes.
speaking, on a regular basis, whether it's eroding
Yes.
our confidence or whatever that thing is. But it also will do that in your partnership, where you'll assume that your spouse is thinking something that they are absolutely not.
Yes.
And it's really important to lean into the positive and just reject the negative thought outright, and then ask the question, like you just
Yes.
asked, hey, are you thinking this thing? Because I feel like, we had this discussion. I think you're thinking this. And it's like, no, I'm not. And you can dispel it, but at the initial thought, it's always better to have the positive thought than the negative thought.
Mhm.
The process you're describing is called perception checking.
Oh, it's nice to
Like-
have a real good term for that.
Like my perception is that you're thinking this. Is that true?
Yeah.
You check out your perception to see if your mind is leading you astray, or is it accurate, or
Mm.
give your
Yeah.
partner a chance to clarify.
Yeah, that's good. It works in friendships too. I think it works in
Yes.
all relationships, that perception checking. That's really good. I love that word, Nancy.
Tunde, you talked about the importance of laughter. I suspect you bring us a lot of laughter to your marriage and your children. You want
Yeah.
to tell
does.
us what that means to you?
Yeah, I think I'm predisposed to laughter, like it's just a part of who I am, and I guess I'm funny, am I funny?
You are funny.
I'm at least funny for a dad and a husband. I don't know about for everybody.
Okay.
He's very entertaining.
but yeah, it feels good to laugh, and it feels good to hear laughter around one's soul. I just think it's good for the soul, and it's
Amen
no
to
matter
that.
what's going on, no matter what's going on, we have to try and look at the positives in life, just to riff off what Lorna was saying. And if you can find the positives, there's a lot of wonderful things to laugh about, and you can't laugh all the time, obviously, because sometimes life can do that to you, but if you can find your way back, that's the sweet spot for me.
Maybe not take everything so seriously.
Yeah, particularly ourselves.
I was just about to say that Tunde does not take himself seriously at all. At all. So it's really fun.
Well, that, combined with the fact that you have a role that is quite powerful in many of the projects that you're working on, to be able to be powerful and not take yourself too seriously is such a wonderful combination.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there is an ego, but that ego is the particular project we're working on. It's the film, and this idea of collaboration, and you have all of these unbelievably talented people surrounding you, that aren't only talented people, but they are also parents and brothers and sisters and human beings that sit on this pyramid of the particular lives that they inhabit. And so it's we're fortunate to do what we do, but it's not brain surgery. It's not rocket science. We're in the business of selling emotion, and that's an important thing. Positive emotions, sometimes negative emotions, entertaining, but we have to kind of put it in perspective, what we do and who we are, and we're working with these unbelievable human beings to service human beings.
Yeah.
So I think when you look at it that way, we're all part of the same team.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Tell
Well
me,
said.
excuse me, tell me how you fit parenting into this big mix that you've been talking about.
Well, it is definitely tricky. I heard Stacey Abrams call it a Jenga, where you're constantly like pulling things out and you're doing things based on priority. So you were saying earlier about priority. So, the priority during the school year is getting my kids to school, looking at their work, making sure they have done their assignments, making sure they're making good grades, or not even grades, making sure they're learning,
Yes.
taking them to their activities. It's like a fine sort of balancing act, where everything is in constant rotation, where
Mhm.
okay, right, like, and I just take it one day at a time, because for the most part, Tunde is usually out of town. The beauty is when he comes in, he steps into a space of help very quickly, which is so awesome and amazing. Like immediately taking the kids to school, immediately helping with homework, immediately taking,
Oh, that
know,
must mean so much to you.
oh God, it does, because it's like instant, like, but for me, it's like, okay, and I do have help. I have childcare. I have a full-time nanny that helps, which is just, I don't think I would be able to do it all without her help. It does take a
Yeah.
village, whether you pay for it or it's family,
Right,
but you
right.
need the village. And so when she can take one child, I take the other. It's just an act of prioritizing. If I have a script due, then obviously I'm going to do that. I'm going to tell the kids, hey, I'm working on this. I'm going to make sure they're okay and they're supported, and whatever their schedule is, I've accounted for it. But there's the priority, so they know, because they know I'm working, and I think it's important for them to see me work. I don't think
Right.
I have to like not work and just do their stuff. I think it's important for them to just see that, because they're going to have to step into a work position, and they need to know what that looks like. And so and they're smart enough to understand that, hey, I'm working, I'm going to be doing this, I won't be as accessible as I normally am, but I'm here for you.
Yes.
And that's sort of how I manage it, which is just a very fine
Juggling act.
balancing situation.
Yeah, kind of a,
Yeah, the fine juggling act. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and immense amount of communication.
Yes.
When I travel, there's never a day that goes by when I don't talk to the kids.
Mhm.
Even if it's a quick
Yep.
2 minutes, prefer a lot longer than that, obviously. But it's important for them to understand that I'm here and I'm around, that I love them, that I would rather be with them, that I'm, working towards being with them more. And then when I'm around, it's about being present, because even though I'm around, I'm still working.
Mhm.
So what gives, well, then in that situation, the work gives, right? And I've got to be there with them, imparting all the things that a dad can in a shorter amount of time than ordinarily I would have.
Mhm.
And it's the best stuff. I love getting up to take the kids to school. I love picking them up when I can. I love hearing fresh all the things that happen to them during the day,
yes,
as opposed to hearing it several hours later, just before they go to
yes.
bed, which is usually when we're able to talk. And it's a wonderful thing occurred to me several years ago where sure, my career was going great, but it's like, what I really indeed, like, what I really truly loved was being a parent and being a husband. Like, those are really genuinely fun things
Mhm.
to be able to be fortunate to have in my life.
Yeah. I
I'm,
think we're fortunate. We're fortunate that way.
you know that Yitzi Weiner is the editor of Authority magazine. He gave me the honor of interviewing him about his relationships.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's going to be posted on the magazine pretty soon. He was very generous, but he makes sure that when he's home, he is present.
Yeah.
He works in an office primarily, uh, but when he's home, he's available to his family, because in his words, the business serves the family, not the other way around.
Yes.
Well said. Well
Well
Absolutely.
said. Well,
Yes.
your children are very fortunate that you're giving them such a beautiful model of a loving, committed marriage. and also modeling unconditional love and the, process of being wonderful parents from, from the outside looking in. I'm just so honored that you spent this time with me today. Thank you for that. How can people get in touch with you if they want to?
I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram, so I'm always sort of checking my DMs, and they can reach out on even on Threads. But I honestly I can't say. Yeah, I think Instagram's probably the best way.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter or X
Yeah.
and Threads.
Okay,
It's always a way to get a hold of me. Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
The social-
Lorna, I have I think it's your Instagram is the ampersand Lorna _dear. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's it. That's correct.
Okay. Well, I want to give people a chance to get in touch with you if they want to, or to give you feedback about what they learned
Absolutely. I
from
would love
this
to
video.
hear. Yeah.
I wish
is
you the
so
very best. If there are anything else I might do that would be helpful to you, I'd be happy to.
I can't think of anything. I mean, posting this interview is amazing. We're just so grateful. It's funny because when it said lessons in power from a thriving power couple, it's like, what is that? Like, I was like, are we a power couple? It's like, what does that mean, really?
Well,
But
it means you're successful in your genre and
yeah.
you are successful in your marriage.
Yeah.
That was the two qualities I was reaching out to. Well, married couples that work together successfully.
Yeah. Okay.
So
That makes
you
Yeah.
fit the bill beautifully.
There we go. There we go.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
again.
much. Thank you for
Okay.
having us on. Thank you. Appreciate
Oh
it.
gosh, my privilege and my pleasure. I hope we get to interact somehow again sometime.
Yes.
Absolutely. We should do it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.